The history of Northern Ireland, from roots to reconciliation. Northern Ireland, a land of rugged coastlines, green valleys, and cities that still carry scars of the past. Today its story is one of resilience and peace building. But to understand how it became what it is, we must go back centuries, to the roots of Irish identity, faith, famine, prejudice and bloodshed. Early Ireland. Christianity came to Ireland in the 5th century with missionaries like St. Patrick. Monasteries flourished, producing manuscripts and scholarship that kept learning alive during Europe's dark ages. For 1,000 years, Ireland was almost entirely Catholic. By the time the Protestant Reformation swept Europe, Ireland's faith was deeply tied to its culture and identity. When England broke from Rome under Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, Ireland refused. Catholicism became not just a religion, but a defiant badge of Irishness, resistance to English dominance. Life was rural and Gaelic, clans ruled by chieftains, land shared communally, wealth measured in cattle. Gaelic was spoken, poetry and music carried history, and kinship bound communities together. First English conquest. England's involvement began with the Norman invasion of 1169, but outside the Pale around Dublin, Gaelic Ireland endured. The real conquest began with the Tudors. Elizabeth I launched brutal campaigns to crush Irish chieftains. The 9 Years' War, 1594 to 1603, was the last great stand of Gaelic Ireland. Led by Hugh O'Neill and Hugh Roe O'Donnell, the Irish scored victories. Battle of Clontibret, 1595. O'Neill's men ambushed and routed English forces. Battle of Yellow Ford, 1598. 2,000 English soldiers killed, their worst defeat in Ireland. But in 1601 at Kinsale, Spanish allies and Irish forces were crushed. In 1603, the Treaty of Mellifont ended the war. The flight of the Earls in 1607 saw Gaelic lords leave for exile. Ireland's old order collapsed. The plantation of Ulster. James I seized vast lands for the plantation of Ulster, 1609. Protestant settlers from England and Scotland were granted fertile estates. Catholics were pushed onto poor land. Towns like Derry and Coleraine were fortified Protestant strongholds. Ulster changed forever. 17th century conflicts. In 1641, Irish Catholics rebelled. Settlers were massacred. Protestant accounts exaggerated numbers into the tens of thousands, fueling centuries of mistrust. Civil war followed. In 1649, Oliver Cromwell landed. His campaign was savage. At Drogheda, around 3,500 soldiers and civilians were slaughtered. At Wexford, up to 2,000 killed. Cromwell's name remains hated in Ireland. The Williamite War, 1689 to 1691, set Catholic King James II against Protestant William of Orange. Siege of Derry, 1689. Starving defenders held out 105 days, crying "No surrender!" Battle of the Boyne, 1690. William's decisive victory, still celebrated by Unionists. Battle of Aughrim, 1691. Around 7,000 dead, the bloodiest Irish battle ever. The Treaty of Limerick promised Catholic rights, but promises were broken. The penal laws followed. Catholics barred from land, education, politics. Ireland became a land of Protestant landlords and dispossessed Catholic tenants. The 18th and 19th centuries. In 1798, the United Irishmen rose. Inspired by America and France, they sought unity of Catholic and Protestant. At first, victories like Oulart Hill, gave hope, but the rising collapsed at Vinegar Hill, where government troops crushed 20,000 rebels. Up to 30,000 died. Sectarian slaughter returned. In 1801, the Act of Union tied Ireland to Britain. At Westminster, Irish MPs were a minority. Debates often portrayed the Irish as backward and unruly, incapable of self-rule. The Great Famine. Then came catastrophe. From 1845 to 1852, potato blight destroyed the staple food of the poor. Over 1 million died. Another million emigrated, yet Ireland still exported grain, beef and butter to Britain. Parliament's response was callous. Charles Trevelyan, the official in charge, said the famine was a direct stroke of providence. MPs feared over-generosity would breed idleness. Relief was deliberately minimal. Evictions continued, workhouses overflowed, cartoons in British papers depicted the Irish as lazy, drunken, ape-like peasants, less than human. Such language stripped away sympathy. For the Irish, it proved that Britain did not care whether they lived or died. The diaspora carried this memory across the Atlantic. Irish emigrants in New York and Boston built communities that funded nationalism back home. Clan na Gael and later NORAD raised money, some of which reached the IRA, towards partition. By the 1900s, nationalism surged. The 1912 Home Rule Bill promised limited self-government. Unionists in Ulster resisted, forming the Ulster Volunteer Force and importing 25,000 rifles in the Larne gun running 1914. Nationalists armed themselves at Howth. In 1916, the Easter Rising erupted. Rebels seized Dublin's GPO. After 6 days they surrendered. Around 450 killed. The leaders executed, turning them into martyrs. The War of Independence, 1919 to 1921, followed. The IRA fought guerrilla war, Kilmichael Ambush, 1920. 17 auxiliaries killed. Crossbarry, 1921. 100 IRA men held off 1,200 troops. Burning of Cork, 1920. Black and Tans torched the city in reprisal. By 1921, 2,000 were dead. The Anglo-Irish Treaty created the Irish Free State, but partitioned 6 counties as Northern Ireland. The Civil War, 1922 to 1923, split the IRA. Fighting in Dublin, Kerry and Limerick killed around 2,000. In the north, Catholics faced discrimination and repression, policed by the B Specials. In the 1930s, southern politics saw the rise of the Blue Shirts, a quasi-fascist movement inspired by Mussolini, though they never took power. The troubles in Northern Ireland, Catholics lived under discrimination. Jobs, housing and votes favoured Protestants. Gerrymandering ensured unionist dominance. In the 1960s, Catholics marched for civil rights. Peaceful protests were met with police batons and loyalist mobs. In 1969, Derry exploded in the Battle of the Bogside. British troops were sent in. At first welcomed, soon they were seen as occupiers. The Provisional IRA formed in 1969. Their campaign escalated. On Bloody Sunday, 30th of January 1972, British paratroopers killed 14 unarmed marchers in Derry. Outrage radicalised thousands. Stormont was dissolved. London imposed direct rule. The 1970s and 80s were an era of bombs and blood. Birmingham pub bombings, 1974. 21 killed, 182 injured. Guildford pub bombings, 1974. 5 killed, 65 injured. Kingsmill massacre, 1976. 10 Protestant workmen lined up and shot. Warren Point ambush, 1979. 18 British soldiers killed in double bomb attack. Mountbatten assassination, 1979. Queen's cousin and 3 others killed by boat bomb. Brighton Hotel bombing, 1984. 5 killed, Margaret Thatcher narrowly escaped. Enniskillen bombing, 1987. 11 killed, 63 injured at a Remembrance Day service. Shankill Road bombing, 1993. 9 civilians killed, dozens injured. Loyalist paramilitaries retaliated with sectarian murders, often dragging Catholic civilians from cars or storming pubs. Fear ruled daily life. By the 1990s, 3,500 were dead, tens of thousands injured. The road to peace. The 1981 hunger strikes, where Bobby Sands and 9 others died, drew global attention. Irish Americans both funded violence and later backed peace. John Hume worked tirelessly for dialogue. By the 1990s, secret talks opened. Here, Mo Mowlam played a decisive role. As Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, she brought warmth and blunt honesty. She visited prisons to speak with Loyalist and Republican leaders. She went into Loyalist heartlands without security, winning trust. Even battling a brain tumour, she pressed forward. Many believe the Good Friday Agreement would not have been signed without her. The Good Friday Agreement, 1998, created power sharing, recognised both British and Irish identities, reformed policing, and offered prisoner release. Violence largely ceased. Northern Ireland today. Today, Belfast and Derry are vibrant cities. Their streets are alive with culture, music and energy. The murals still speak of division, of martyrs, heroes and loss. But they also speak of peace, unity and hope. The peace walls still stand, reminders of a fractured past, yet younger generations walk across them with less fear than their parents once knew. Brexit has reopened debates over borders and sovereignty, but war has not returned. Northern Ireland's people have lived too long with its shadow to easily go back. There is still an uneasy peace between some in opposing sides, but with time hopefully trust can be built. From Clontibret to Kinsale, from Argrim to Vinegar Hill, from the Great Famine to the bombings of Birmingham and Brighton, the history of Northern Ireland is a story of conquest, prejudice, resistance and survival. It has never been a comfortable story. In Westminster, Irish suffering was too often dismissed as laziness or divine punishment. In newspapers and cartoons, the Irish were caricatured as brutes and animals. On the streets of Belfast and Derry, civilians paid the price of bombs and bullets. Yet it is also a story of resilience, endurance and reconciliation. A story where, after centuries of struggle, leaders and ordinary people chose dialogue over violence. And thanks in no small part to the courage and empathy of figures like Mo Mowlam, peace became possible. The history of Northern Ireland reminds us that injustice breeds violence, but it also shows that empathy and courage can break the cycle. It is a past written in blood, but it offers a future written in hope. Personal reflection. I was born in the same year as Bloody Sunday. Growing up, my family were open about what was happening in Northern Ireland. The Troubles, as they were called. My grandfather had a very clear opinion on why the IRA existed. To him it was born out of centuries of prejudice and the dehumanisation of a whole community of people, mainly Catholics, who had been treated as second class in their own land. At school, I was taught the standard English curriculum. We were told about the troubles, but never the deeper causes. It was presented as senseless violence, almost as though it had appeared out of nowhere. The prejudice, the discrimination, the history of injustice, all of that was left out. It wasn't until university that I began to see the roots, and even then it was understated, tucked away, as if it were too uncomfortable to face. When I finally learned the truths, I was angry. Angry that so much had been hidden. Angry that children like me were taught only part of the story. That anger stayed with me, and I made a point of challenging it. Whenever the troubles were casually discussed, I would bring up the causes, the poverty, the injustice, the prejudice that gave rise to the IRA. I wanted people to understand that violence doesn't appear in a vacuum. It grows out of conditions that are ignored. But it wasn't only anger, we also lived in fear. Travelling into cities, going Christmas shopping, there were always warnings over the tannoy systems. Do not leave bags unattended. Posters in train stations reminded us to be vigilant. We were told to watch for suspect packages, to stay alert at all times. There were bombings in Manchester, Warrington, London, ordinary places where ordinary people died. I remember that atmosphere of tension. As children, we didn't understand why the IRA were killing innocent English people. And I've often thought about education. If my schooling taught me to see the troubles without sympathy for the Irish, what must Irish children have been taught? They were raised just as we were, to be unsympathetic to the other side. Both sides inherited blinkers. Both sides carried forward prejudice. That ignorance kept the schism alive. Looking back, I honestly believe that without Mo Mowlam's tenacity, her warmth, and her sheer refusal to give up on people, the conflict might never have ended. She gave both communities someone they could trust. And it was that trust, so rare in the history of Northern Ireland, that finally allowed peace to take hold. If you found this video insightful, please like, share and subscribe for more deep dives into history. And as always, stay curious.